Got my tasty beverage. And we are live. So a few items of note to kick off today's live stream. Number one, I am using OBS 26. I'm going back to OBS 26 instead of 27 because the stream delay that if we get cut off, it goes ahead and continues the connection from when it got cut off, but the delay in the stream increases. That always worked with OBS 26 and appears to not work with OBS 27. And so far today we have a delay of 1 second despite having the connection being live for several minutes, and the connection has held, through that time. So for my purposes, it's looking like OBS 27 might be a little bit of a pooper. So that's point number one. Point number two. This guy, how do we say this? Centenari. I've been saying this guy's name wrong forever. All right, Centenari asked the question, Dave, are you sick? Do you have COVID? Because I was obviously a little bit under the weather last week and I haven't live streamed in a week. So there might be some concern out there that, Dave died or whatever. And no, I'm actually fine. Hey, Darren. Yeah, exactly. We'll see today. So in response to that, just so you guys know, I am fine. It's been a combination of traveling for a week, then being sick, more or less, for a week, and then, we're in the season where the mushrooms are starting to pop out of the ground, and pretty much yesterday, the bulk of the day was devoted to harvesting and processing mushrooms, and there's just stuff going on, right? And so, anyway, that's why I've been absent as far as live streaming goes. So Centenari also asked this question, which I won't read, but the whole gist of it is that there is a control for Blender that lets you use your device to control the Blender camera. Not at all surprising that something like that would be available. He used this example of what can be done with it. So let's look at that for half a second. And so my answer to Centenari's question is this. Number one, this type of camera motion actually in the big scheme of things is fairly old school. If you go back and look at any of the movies that, for example, Tony Scott did with Denzel Washington, movies like Deja Vu or Unstoppable, Pelham 13, which I believe, I think Travolta was in that one. Well, for whatever reason, Tony Scott's cinematographer really mastered this technique, and they really used it effectively in those action movies. And it's a great technique, but it is also, in terms of camera technique, it's nothing new. Like, hey, Maria, there's nothing new about this. And I would say, to answer the specific question, the answer is no. For the show that I'm working on, this is not an appropriate technique. There may be times or situations where it could be useful, but basically, no. For some other kind of show, I think what you're going to see and what you normally see with stuff like this is that once people grab this new technology and start integrating it into the work they're doing with Blender, what will happen is you're going to see a ton of it, and it's going to become the flavor of the week for a short time just because you can do it. And I hate to always relate everything to the stock market, but actually there's a correlation, which is that the whole reason the dumb money gloms onto a trend is because by the time you're aware of the trend, or vis-a-vis this question, by the time you're aware of a technological solution that makes it easy to do something that formerly was hard, by the time that technology propagates out to the marketplace, it's already old news. It's already a tired effect that we've seen a million times. And so that's what we saw with bullet time back around the year 2000. When The Matrix did it, all of a sudden it showed up everywhere in all kinds of TV commercials, and it very quickly became overused and not cool anymore, right? So this is going to be something that's going to be cool for about a day or two, and then hopefully what we'll see is that people will begin to judiciously say, well, does this contribute materially to the type of storytelling that I'm doing? In some cases, being able to control your Blender camera with your phone, yeah, I mean, it might be useful. Something like that in OpenToonz might be useful, but let's face it, when you're dealing with a 2D animation, it's actually kind of the rare case where you're actually doing a 3D camera move anyway. You know, usually we're talking about locked shots. We're talking about a like we have here, a fixed camera point of view, because the economies essentially, once you move the camera at all in a 2D animation, you've increased your workload by an order of magnitude instantly, more or less. It's not completely true, but it's kind of true, right? The economical place where it kind of makes sense would be for a simple slow pan or parallax move, but in most cases for an anime, you accomplish the same thing by just cropping your shot, which if I go through here, I probably, yeah, right there's an example of it. You know, in this shot, where the camera's moving, and when you watch it, we feel the tension or the drama of the fact that the camera's moving. Okay, so that contributes to the storytelling. The question is, does parallax actually matter in a shot like this? And the answer is almost never. Once in a while it matters. Once in a while it's a cool effect, but generally just not that important. So we will maybe tap into that effect or that capability when the time comes. But I just wanted to answer Centenari's question, because he always asks very good questions and has very, very well thought out comments on my videos that are actually helpful to you guys, because he'll post a comment on a video that points out, you know, I've got a 2-hour live stream, and he'll point out the point at 18 minutes where I actually said something useful, right? And so I really value his help in that regard. So kudos to you, Centenari, for your question and comments, and on we go. So where are we at? Well, I actually had a good conversation yesterday with my film distributor. The good news from my vantage point is that there's no question that my distribution partner is 100% committed to this show, okay, as far as getting it released and, you know, in all of the likely platforms and all the rest. So that's good. That wasn't a surprise, but as I'd mentioned, you know, a month ago or whatever, that there was a conversation with a niche platform where potentially there was a small chance of them underwriting the show, and that basically hasn't happened. So hey Ed, hey, welcome to the live stream. I appreciate you being here. So the situation today for the show is as follows. Number one, I expect in about 2 weeks I'm probably going to go ahead and launch the crowdfund. I'm going to be regrouping with my distributor, who, as I've mentioned, has about 500,000 YouTube subscribers. So they've got a really good presence on YouTube. And we're going to kind of go over a tick list together of what they can do as my distribution partner to help promote the crowdfund. Because if we can underwrite the cost of the show such that I can basically put my head down and focus for 4 years, which is what we're talking about, whatever, you know, just making people aware of the crowdfund situation. And it looks like we just got a disconnect from OBS. So Darren, could you tell me if the delay closed the gap? If you notice that would be really, really cool. And so Ed, I don't know if you've ever lurked on my live stream at all, and I know you and I have had some very brief conversations about maybe working on something together, and obviously for a host of reasons this is probably not the right time for that, but I love your work. Most recently I haven't really been using Krita. I've been pretty much anchored into Tahoma2D, but if we just hit the old play button here, you can kind of get a sense of what I've been doing and what I'm working on. And at this point we are 3 minutes of animation away from having 2 24-minute episodes completely animated. No closed gaps, so you notice the cutoff. Okay. Well, that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. It does seem to be a pretty stable connection today. So, you know, the other thing about crowdfunding is if we get enough support, then obviously it would make sense, and I told my distributor this when we talked about it yesterday, is you know, it would make sense to try to find maybe a couple people that maybe could assist, on the production side with some of the, just some of the grunt work. Because let's face it, when it comes to animation, it's all grunt work. It's all just time, and so if we can try to offset some of that by, by getting a little help, that might be something that's quite useful. So anyway, so I'll let this kind of play. It's got about another minute before we get to the point where we're going to be having to begin today's work. And so what we've got is we got the wedding going on. Golik is talking to the crowd, but the people are kind of basically bitching about the taxes. So they're sort of upsetting Golik's groove here a little bit. And what are you going to do about it, kind of thing. And then, of course, miracle of miracles, it starts raining, which ostensibly has not happened in literally years. They've been in a drought for a long, long time. So Golik, being the opportunistic bad guy that he is, seizes upon the opportunity to assign some sort of miraculous event to this and try to use that coincidence to undergird his nefarious scheme. So looking at the comments real quick, where you learned animation, Chris K. I learned here on YouTube. I mean, I've always been okay, so this is where we're at today. I've always been a cartoonist, but most of what I've learned doing animation has been learned over the last between 2 and 3 years, just doing it here on YouTube. And for the first year, I was working on this anime thing, and then as I've talked about on other live streams, the opportunity to bring a product to market presented itself, and so that was when, about a little over a year ago, I sort of shift gears toward this particular show that I'm working on. Okay, so that's kind of the story behind that. So animation, I've kind of learned the hard way just by doing it, and the economies of producing a lot, needing to create a lot of animation in a relatively short period of time, has caused me to adopt certain practices that, that facilitate a fairly efficient, approach to the job at hand. And this shot's actually a good example. This whole shot, I still have to fill in her garment right here, but actually this whole shot I did like 2 days ago. The whole thing took 20 minutes. I mean, it was simply a matter of drawing the pencil test, and the ink and paint went really quickly. And now I just have to add the lip sync, and basically the shot is done. I mean, we stuck a background from another shot, put it out of focus, and we're good to go. So, if you can do it, that's the way to do it, with the caveat that, we want to make sure that it's going to support the storytelling, right? So that's what we're trying to do. As we look at quick gap. Okay. So yeah, it looks like OBS still takes about 200-300 frames to reconnect. Wonderful resource on YouTube for learning animation. So Darren says, I think you'd find the benefits in Tahoma. It's a different paradigm to Krita, but Dave can tell you all about that. So I'm assuming, yeah, and you know what, Ed? Okay, so let me address the following to Ed. This is kind of important. Ed is a guy that you want to, for those who might come here or watch this video later, the guy that's in the comments, Ed Tadeo, is a hell of a talented guy. And he's doing very good work exclusively in Krita, and then he's using Hit Film Express typically for his editing. Okay, editing, color correction, things like that. And if you want to, he's not really doing a lot of teaching, although I think he's been doing more of that lately. For the last 6 months, he's been live streaming, whereas previously he was really not live streaming too much, mostly just posting videos. And but if you want to see what can be done with Krita, dude, you want to go to Ed's channel, because he's doing as good a job with animation in Krita as anybody on the planet, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I can tell. And so, not to be too much of a fanboy here, but Ed has got it going on when it comes to Krita. So the question for a guy like Ed would be, well, why would you ever want to go outside of Krita? And I think that, considering that most of my workflow in Tahoma is very similar to the way I work in Krita. The question is, well, why would you want to go to Tahoma? Basically, there's a good side and a downside. The downside is if you like the Krita or Photoshop or GIMP type of paradigm where you have layers in your imagery, then Krita is certainly stronger for that. So anything that involves painting, basically you're a painter, background painting, you're going to, no, you're doing fine, Ed. Anything that involves painting and layers and blending modes is absolutely doable in Tahoma, but you're going to have to do it mostly by way of the schematic, and you're only going to see the results of it when you go into the rendered mode. So this is what the actual imagery looks like, and then with some effects that I added, this is what the final imagery looks like. I still need to add shadows, by the way, on this particular shot. Okay, so layers and layer groups and things like that that are awesome in Krita, you can't really do very easily in Tahoma, but you sort of can. So one way that you can would be with sub-scenes. So for example, I can take these two layers and I have a hotkey that I've assigned to it, but what I just did was I took the two layers that comprise the background and I actually put them in a sub-scene. So now these two layers are not only in a scene all by themselves, but also the schematic associated with those layers is in a separate schematic. So that means that I can parcel out my work into pieces and work on the different I appreciate that. I didn't really know you were watching, but it's not as straightforward. And like I can jump into Krita and add an adjustment layer or a layer, like for an animated sequence. I might, like for example, if these characters were moving around and I needed to add something over top of them, in Krita it really makes a lot of sense sometimes to just add a new layer and have a static image that overlays the entire animation, things like that, and then you bake it down into a single layer, you know, and that's just kind of how you do it. Where Tahoma and OpenToonz beat the daylights out of Krita, and I don't see anything on the horizon that means this is going to change. Okay, because some people there are fanboys out there that are talking about Krita 5. Okay, I don't. No, I understand, Ed, but the truth of the matter is, if you kind of go down the OpenToonz route, it's probably going to take you. It's only going to take you a couple weeks to get up to speed where you can be productive doing the kinds of things you've been doing. I feel pretty strong saying that. So. But yeah, the Krita hit film combination is really powerful, and you know, all somebody has to do is look at your channel to understand that. So where Krita cannot touch OpenToonz is things like this, hitting the animate tool, for example, and just being able to move things around and have interpolated animation over time. Okay, so this, what I just did, you cannot do in Krita. And I do not believe for an instant that that's going to change anytime soon. And when they add anything to Krita that kind of sort of gets you there, it's going to be unstable and buggy and crash prone and all the rest for at least a year. So that's my prediction. We'll see if I'm right. But so hey, Yvette, good to see you here today. Okay, so the other thing with OpenToonz and Krita with OpenToonz and Tahoma that is arguably stronger. Dropout. Waiting for the dropout. Okay, so from an animation standpoint, the closest you get in Krita to what you can do in OpenToonz would be taking some layers, grouping them, and then adding animation keys to the group. That kind of gets you there, but you still have to roll your own tweens where all the in-between animation, you know, you have to move things. And so you learn in Krita to work from the inside out where, you know, if a guy's going to wave his arm around, but he's also going to move across the screen, what you learn in Krita is to animate the arm, get that baked into the animation, and then you take that animated sequence and sort of move it over time. And you just roll all your own tweens, right? And you can do that, and I've done plenty of it. So it's just that at the end of the day, I've just been getting better quality work done faster with Tahoma or OpenToonz. It doesn't matter which. I happen to use Tahoma because I can cut and paste from Krita into Tahoma, you know, using the clipboard. For Ed, by the way, that's something you might want to be aware of. If you wanted to take, okay, so this would be my advice, okay, if I will be so bold as to give advice to Ed, this would be my advice. Be aware that with Tahoma2D you can cut and paste. You probably already know that. But what that means is you could actually take a group of 6 layers in Krita that are in a group, and then you can cut and paste the group, and the entire composited image will go on the clipboard, and it'll paste into OpenToonz, well, not OpenToonz. It'll paste into Tahoma as a composite flat raster image, which you can then animate. So the short path of learning for a guy like Ed would be to simply keep working in Krita, but whenever you want those animation tools, just take the stuff you have in Krita and cut and paste it into Tahoma, and then use the animation tools and render it out. And now you really don't have to learn very much. You know, you just have to learn how to use the animation tools, which for me is a matter of hitting the A key, you know, and then to a lesser degree, the X key to use the plastic tool. Okay, because the liquefy tool in Krita is really powerful for sort of mushing pixels around. But if what you want to do is actually have controlled animation of puppet style characters, this is where, okay, so obviously we can argue about how useful it is in this particular case, especially because these characters are married together in the same layer. But what I just did actually might be quite appropriate to this shot that I'm working on right now. So if I take this key and say, okay, so what she does is she leans in. Okay, so this is really quick. Say, hey, King. So we're gonna put lip sync over top of this. Remember. Okay, so she leans in and says something. Okay, and then I'm gonna duplicate this key, and then I'm gonna give him just a little secondary motion in response. Okay. Okay, now to do that in Krita, you can do it. You know, it's just like I said, doing layers and grouping is possible in Tahoma. It's just harder. Well, what I just did in Tahoma, you can do in Krita, but it's harder. So it's all just a matter of trade-offs. But for me, the plastic tool for judicious secondary animation like this, it's really, really useful. So anyway, I got to go in here and actually make a quick tweako to this drawing in order to finish putting her costume in. And I believe if I go back to my edit, well, you're mostly frame by frame. So the question is when, okay, I'm just looking at her costume to see what the color needs to be. So the question really becomes, and by the way, this is the wrong color. This actually needs to be a muted pink. So the question is, what are you going to gain by using the animation tools? Right? Okay, we got a little problem. Let's go here and up. There's the problem. Okay, so now I have a hotkey. I hit the tilde key and it isolates the current layer. So this is a complete side note, but by the way, you might be wondering, why do we see that line here but we don't see it here? And the reason we don't see it here is because the plastic tool crops when it creates that mesh. It actually crops the image to the pixels, so that mesh needs to be recreated. Anyway, that's neither here nor there really. All right, so let me just get this fixed so that we can move forward with finishing this shot up. Okay, and now this seems to be locked. I'm gonna, well, this just goes to show that like every program, Tahoma has its share of bugs too. But what I'm gonna do is just basically try to close that. If I hit the, I think we have a filled shape there, so boop, yeah, that's all I needed. Okay, so now we go back here and we see that she's still cut off. Okay, so what I need to do is recreate the mesh. So I'm gonna go create mesh, and now you can see that the stuff I just drew is folded into the mesh. And I guess we'll delete the level entirely, and now what we should have is the same shot but with the rest of her costume integrated into the whole. And now if I hit Control tilde, it unsolos the layer. That's not a default hotkey, by the way, in Tahoma. You got to set that one up yourself. So, so yeah. But you know, Ed's right. If you're really into frame by frame animation and you enjoy taking, like if I was doing this right here, if I was going to do this in Krita, the way I would do it is I would go to a later frame where I want her to move, and I would probably just do a selection, cut her head out, rotate it a little bit, and then just fill in the hole that I created. And so then you get the same effect with frame by frame animation. The downside is, in this case, that movement is interpolated actually over 2 frames, not 1. And so again, you're in that situation where you need to roll your own tweens. If you enjoy rolling your own tweens though, then, you know, do it. It's kind of fun and, you know, kind of an interesting creative process. So save all your work, save early, save often. Okay, so Mikhail Humphrey says, I watched your video on vector. How do we solve vector filling problems? I don't have a good answer to that other than the latest versions of certainly Tahoma, and I would assume OpenToonz as well, which is what, up to 1.5 now, I think. Most of the filling problems with vectors seem to be solved. At least they're a lot better than they used to be. So, you know, you just have to, it's a whole nother discussion, but basically here's what happens. I think that, at least I think this is what happens. You can have 2 vectors, like you can use snapping so that one vector snaps to another. But if you actually look at if you were to zoom in and look at the very end of that vector, you might find that there's not actually a technical overlap between the, you know, your endpoint and the other vector that you're trying to connect to. Okay, so it's really possible to have what looks for all the world like a closed shape, but it actually isn't a closed shape. As I recall, let me see here. The fill check tool, as I recall, I think does do a pretty good job of showing you on vector levels whether you have fillable shapes. But I don't remember. I just don't use vectors that often because they have been so problematic, you know, over time. The main thing I use them for is what I'm about to use them for, actually. So you'll see it right now in real time. Okay, so I'm going to hit insert and I'm going to actually add a vector level here. And the reason I'm doing that is just for shadows. So, okay. So we'll see a couple things about the plastic tool that come into play here as well. All right, so when I'm using shadows, what I typically am going to do is hit the B key, and then I'm going to invoke all of these options. Auto close, auto group, auto fill. And what that does is it allows me to just do what the freehand path tool in Krita does, which is it just lets you draw a shape and it automatically gets filled. Okay. Now there's something here that's a bit curious. Why does that look kind of gray? We'll just call that a bug. So what I'm going to do right now actually is disconnect the plastic tool. So I'm going to go into the stage schematic and take this level and just connect it here. So the plastic tool animation that I just did is gone. And the reason for that is that, and I'm just going to kind of hide the level. Okay, so the reason I did that is that once you assign the plastic tool to a level, you cannot just draw into that level in the you know, in the live view, if you will, right? You would actually have to go over to the drawing strip to continue to draw on it once you've locked it to the plastic tool. So if you know you're going to be doing some plastic tool animation, just leave it disconnected until you're ready to, you know, sort of finalize the animation, right? So anyway, moving forward, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and put in these shapes like this. And then what I'm also going to do is if I go to my scene settings, I'm going to enable column, color filter, and transparency for blending. And then I'm going to go ahead and take the overall opacity of this level and turn it down to an appropriate shadow level, like that. And all that did was make it so that the shadows will render with that transparency baked into them. So I can see right now that I need to add a little bit more of a shadow there. And so blah, blah, blah. This is just, as I say, we're just going to kind of do the grunt work here. Okay, and then, so getting back to the plastic tool, once I got these shadows in there and also the lip sync, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of the levels, like for the mouth and for the shadows, that would be this one, okay? The characters, the shadows, and then the lip sync mouth level, which doesn't exist yet, will all be piped through the plastic tool so that that deformation animation affects all of those levels, okay? So you sort of work out. And again, this is absolutely what I found when I was doing more animation in Krita, is you really want to think about your order of operations. So one thing you'll notice here, by the way, is that vectors are inherently resolution independent. In practice, meaning that they are an infinite canvas, right? You're not locked to what the camera can see. So anyway, sometimes that's a benefit, sometimes it's no big deal. So I just want to get these guys kind of shadows happening. And so then we are, of course, going to have to add the lip sync. So I'm going to just move the plastic tool downstream, and I'm going to hit the B key. Okay, so now what we have is a little bit of a problem, because what I want to do is I actually want to go through here and select her mouth like this and actually cut it out. And I want to paste it into this level. Okay, and the reason I did that is so I can give her her 3 mouth shapes and, you know, just animate the mouth separately and not have to worry about you know, making a bunch of variations of this underlying drawing. So over here we obviously have a problem, and I can sample this palette entry and then hit the F key and fill that in, and now we're back to normal again. And so now we can put the lip sync on this level all by itself. So for her, I'm going to hit the D key and duplicate this. And then we're going to kind of do this the clunky way. I'm going to just, not very sophisticated, I'm going to just move this up. And I'm going to move, I didn't actually mean to stretch that. S key again. And I'm going to stretch this down a little bit. So I'm keeping it within the range of the whole, I guess the pixels that are in play here. So this is where the liquefy tool in Krita is actually nicer, because I could actually just drag against her lower lip and have it stretch down. Here we have a little bit of a more clunky situation, because now I have to sort of decide how I'm going to fill this in and make it work. So I'm going to hit the G key, and I'm actually going to use the Smart Raster Paint tool like this. So I'm going to basically draw those shapes up, and then I'm going to essentially chisel back out of them. And as always, I reserve the right to foul this up completely and wind up going, oh, that looks stupid. So hitting the B key. And then I need to actually hit the V key and clean up this bit of a mess here we have. Okay, so now the question, of course, becomes, does the lip sync look okay? Because normally I'm not dealing with quite as usually the mouth shape is just a shape, right? It's just like a shaded shape. It's not actually going to be typically having multiple colors and all this sort of thing. Sometimes it does, but you know, with her full lips, you know, you just have a little bit more. She looks like she's had a little bit of Botox, frankly. And while I'm here, I think I'm going to go ahead and erase, do a little bit of cleanup on this as well. So G key, V key, boom. Oops, wrong color there, Jack. So slightly open mouth, more open mouth. Can we make a duplicate and actually just stretch the whole thing? This is risky behavior. Don't know if it's going to work, but we'll try. I may have to go back and kind of do the simple frame-by-frame animation thing here to make this actually look okay. Oh, that actually came out okay. That I don't mind. Okay. So now in this case, I think I'm going to come back to this one, call this my neutral. And right here, let's actually delete that frame. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Alt down arrow because I want to actually move everything downstream. Because I basically miscalculated how long it's going to take her to say her lines. Which, by the way, I don't know what her lines are. And I'm thinking about actually making a slight mod to the script in order to accommodate. Whoops, okay, that was not supposed to happen. Oh, you silly thing. I just want to repeat frame 1. There we go. Okay. Oops. Save our work. Okay, check. Okay, he said the fill is technically not filled at the smaller level if you are having vector problems. Right. And you find that to be the case because what happens is you can draw a vector that looks like it's closed but it won't fill, but if you grab the end of it and move it a little bit so that it actually does legally close the shape, all of a sudden the fill shows up, right? So your mileage may vary, but basically that's pretty much what you get with vectors in OpenToonz. So, all right, I need to. Did you watch American Dad or Family Guy? I'm not a huge Family Guy fan, but I love American Dad. Yeah, I like that show a lot. It's one of my faves. I always like the second tier stuff from Seth MacFarlane or Matt Groening. So I'm not a big fan of The Simpsons or Family Guy, but I love Futurama and American Dad. So go figure. There's no accounting for taste. Okay, so according to the script, I've got Golek saying, "This marriage has surely brought favor to our land." I'm going to give that line of dialogue to Carliana, which is this woman. This is Tianara's mother, who is she's in cahoots with Golek with this scheme to get the prince married up. And the reason is because she's actually a distant cousin of Golek, and unbeknownst to the king, this is actually a play to get a legitimate claim to the crown. Not very nice. Okay, so she says, "This marriage has surely brought favor to the land." Okay, and I think what I'm going to do is have the king go, I'm just going to have him go, Okay, so now you can see a couple issues. Pretty big issues, actually. We don't need any lip sync for the king, after all, because he's just going to go, He just kind of grunts. Okay, so she leans in and says her lines. And she leans in, says her line. That's it. So our shot is almost done, actually. But we do have some problems on the rendering side for obvious reasons. So let's go in here. Now we'll go into the effects schematic. And the problem that we have is that the body highlighting effects that are giving us our lighting here, basically our rim light and then our shadow area, are only affecting column 2. So what do we do about that? Well, it's actually pretty simple. What we're going to do is we're going to do an insert effects layer blending over. And then we can just take and essentially combine all these levels together like a group. Shadows. Okay, so we're close, but you say, well, wait, there seems to be a problem there, Dave. Well, the problem is that I believe that the stacking order in the over effect, but that could be because the buffer needs to yep, there we go. Okay, so that's what I thought. This is a long-standing kind of issue with Tahoma or OpenToonz, which is that sometimes if you go into rendered mode, what happens is that rendered image gets cached in memory, and if you don't like scroll through it or do something to wake it up, then you can make a change structurally, like I did here, to the compositing order, and it doesn't propagate through the preview. And so by just jumping to a different frame, it'll update, and all of a sudden you find out everything is, all is well. Okay, so now I haven't looked at the comments and things in a while, and it looks like there's nothing new. And it's showing 3 concurrent viewers, so that means that whatever I'm doing today is really not very interesting at this point. So, not altogether surprising. So I think there's one thing I want to add. Control C. I'm going to go here. And after she says her line of dialogue, I think I'm going to have her bounce back to her initial position. So we'll go ahead and give that a 2-frame transition. And then, of course, this key is now wrong. So I need to go Control C, Control V. And this key is wrong as well. And that's, I'm not even going to explain that. It's got to do with using global keys. I kind of made a mistake here. So, but that's okay. We can fix it by simply redoing this this one animation key. So we're animate mode and boop. That's it. Okay, there we go. I think our shot is done, other than the fact that, gosh, I kind of almost want to put some shadows on his eyes, but let me see. I think we'll skip that. We'll skip that. So save all. Let's go to our render settings. We are now working on shot number 595. So let's make sure that our render settings are correct. By the way, this is one thing that for Ed, one of the reasons I like Tahoma and OpenToonz way, way more than Krita, huge thing for me, is that this is actually one of the massive benefits of OpenToonz and Tahoma versus Krita, which is that the render settings for your scene are baked into the scene file. This is 595, and these are going to be JPEGs. Okay? And the reason that's a benefit is that what if, for example, let's let this render for half a second. So what if, for example, I come back a few weeks later and I go, I really think I could improve the background painting on that shot, let's say. Okay? With OpenToonz or Tahoma, you can go in, even offline. You could take the image, like in this shot. You could take the image for the okay. And Tahoma just blew up. That hasn't happened in a long time. That has not happened in a long time. Why it happened, I have absolutely no clue. But stuff happens. It's not like this doesn't happen with every program. I've certainly had my share of rants about Krita crashing, All right, so let me make sure. Yeah, so everything's saved. We're in good shape. Okay, so this actually comes back to what I was about to say. In Tahoma, as you can see, and this is wrong, by the way. I actually made a mistake here. This is supposed to be in a subfolder called render. Okay. In Tahoma, because the settings for the render are baked into the scene, I can make a change and just immediately re-render it, and it's literally takes seconds. File. I'll just save all to be safe here. Okay. So I go in, I update my background painting, let's say, and then I just hit Control-Shift-R, and it immediately re-renders it to the same location. And when I go back to my show edit, the image sequence that's in the show is automatically updated. So basically, incrementally improving your shots, sometimes weeks apart, is easy peasy in Tahoma 2D. Whereas in Krita, you have to go in and manually reset the render settings every single time you open the file, and it renders slower for what that's worth as well. Okay, so let's go here, and I'm just going to hit Control-Shift-R, and wango bango, it's just going to re-render, and hopefully it won't blow up again this time. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my show, and simply go like this, delete that out of the storyboard, go in here to my project media, and we're going to go to anime, salt and light, scenes, should be, I believe, 595. Where's 595? There it is. And these images are all erroneous. They can all be deleted. They are not supposed to be there. They were all supposed to be put here in this location. So I'm going to open this up, set this to 8 frames per second, and then we're going to look for 595 here in the media pool. And there it is, right there. We're going to drag this in. We're going to make it so it doesn't do any resampling, and now we should have, he does his announcement, and then these guys are chit-chatting. And I'd say it worked out perfectly. Okay, so I will put this on the big screen so you guys can see it, and that of course reminds me to be on the correct screen. So this is what we have, and I do see a couple things I want to fix. Okay, the rim light is too harsh. It's making the characters pop against the defocused background too much to where they're sort of sticking out like a sore thumb, and I don't think that looks very good. So I can fix that. So now, again, talking a lot to Ed today just because I know you're here, so I'm kind of talking about the differences between Tahoma and Krita. Here I can go into my effects schematic and just go here to my body highlighting effect. And I'm just going to crank up the transparency to about here. As you can see, that's a little softer effect. And then I literally just hit Control-Shift-R. It re-renders, and when I go back to my show, everything's updated. It's that quick to make fixes and corrections. So for that reason, I love it, because as I was having this conversation with my distributor yesterday, I told him, look, once I get these 3 minutes done, like these last 3 minutes of episode 2, I expect to go through and spend at least a month just going through episode 1 and fixing things. So the more of these scenes that we have in Tahoma rather than Krita, which unfortunately there's a lot of shots that were done in Krita in episode 1 especially, the quicker I can go in and fix things and just re-render, and the whole film edit or the show edit just updates. You know, it's real boom, 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 you know. So I really enjoy that aspect of working with Tahoma. So anyway, okay, so the next shot, clearly we're coming back to the crowd that's realized it's raining, which means it's this same shot. We're going to reuse this shot. All right, so there's that. Let's come back here, and let's start closing things down. Seems like oh yeah, in the dialogue for this shot, I want to put in that the Speaky, the king, grunts ascent. Well, let's call it uncertain ascent. I know you guys can't see this. I'm just on the other screen. I like to keep the script updated, you know, synced with the edit, because it does evolve to a degree over time. So I'm working in, I use OpenOffice for with basically some special styling that I created so that this complies with Hollywood style, you know, screenplay conventions. People are giddy, raising their hands, catching raindrops in their mouths and laughing. Now, I don't know if we're going to go quite that far. And this line of dialogue, can you believe it? Yes, yes, it's raining. Let the prince be married. The skies have showed us favor. So we have basically this really crazy religious reaction to the fact that it's raining. Fed and propagated by Golek, who is casting the current situation through the lens of his own agenda. Gee, we never see real political leaders ever do that in the real world, do we? No, we don't see that. No, they're all good guys and heroes. Okay, Yes, a little bit of an acerbic commentary there on my part. Let me look at the comments here for half a second. To me, it's fascinating to hear you talk about the features of Tahoma that brought you here from Krita. You used to be a big Krita fanboy because it worked for you at the time. You're correct. It did work for me at the time, and there are things about Krita that I still like better than Tahoma. No question. The problem is, I'm getting the work done. It looks good. The pace is appropriate to what I'm trying to accomplish. It's just that on balance, Tahoma keeps turning out to be the right tool for the job for this show. There's other things that I could be doing where that might not be the case, you know? So, but I will say this. What actually happened was, when I started this show, I was actually working in OpenToonz. What happened was, I learned a lot of hard lessons working with Krita, and then I took what I learned in Krita and adapted it back into my workflow in Tahoma, and that's why the workflow in Tahoma is better than it used to be. And so everything you learn, you know, feeds the process. And certainly if you're a Blender person, what you're doing with Blender is going to inform what you can do in OpenToonz, because different tools sort of awaken different ideas and different approaches. So I would say for the last month or so, I've been able to consistently get the work done as quickly as I want to, at the quality level that I want to, plus with that added benefit I just mentioned of being able to go in and improve things and then just do a quick re-render, and I'm on to the next show, or on to the next scene, you know, or whatever. So, okay. So now what we have is this shot. Looking for my mouse. Okay, is a go over here. Now, this is actually another example of a shot that'll probably wind up getting improved. Okay, why? Because I actually don't think that the background painting is that good. Okay, the background painting was fairly quick and rough. I don't remember what my mindset was at the time that I did it. It was about a week or so ago, and I'm just not satisfied with that background painting. It's defocused. I'm getting away with it a little bit because it's defocused, but I mean, this is actually a great example of a background painting that just isn't good enough. Now, if I fix this guy a little bit, and I fix this guy a little bit, I think we'll be where we need to be. These two guys are okay, and this sort of shaded purple sense of just like a crowd in the background, I think that's working. It's mainly these two guys that are flanking the shot that are bugging me. I just don't think I drew them very well. I was in a hurry, and I did crap work. So crap work doesn't work for me, despite the fact that I seem to do it a lot. Okay. So anyway, Darren, I think for your unique experience, it could be useful to Ed to understand what Tahoma could do for him if you wanted to try it out. Yeah, and I would say, you know, easiest transition for a guy like Ed to Tahoma specifically is just keep working in Krita. Just use Krita, and then whenever you want to use the little bit better animation tools or keyframe animation, or when you want to use keyframe interpolation and maybe the plastic tool, just cut and paste your stuff from Krita into Tahoma. When I started using Tahoma a lot more about, I don't know, 2-3 months ago, that's what I was doing. I was actually creating the assets, including the characters. If we go back in the show to, let's just, a lot of these assets were actually being drawn in Krita and just pasted into Tahoma2D for animation. So this shot may well have been done, like these assets might have been done in Krita. I don't remember, you know, frankly. But it's very possible that they were. Like this is a great example of a single shot where I probably overlaid the eyes and then used the plastic tool against it. But the actual yeah, and I get your point, Ed. Yeah, quit beating the point to death. And right, I understand. You're correct. Yeah, and it's only appropriate to talk about here because it is true for people that have followed me for a long time that there's been a really long process of bouncing between the two programs. So anyway, that's all good. Let's, like I said, I thought I switched screens, but apparently I didn't. I'm going to go back to this shot right. Bear with me, folks. I want to go back to this shot where I said the background painting isn't like stellar. Oh, I'm sure Ed gets that all the time. I get it all the time. People are always asking me if I, have I used Harmony? Have I used Clip Studio Paint? Have I used this? Have I used that? I get it. But let's not forget that Ed has over 100,000 YouTube subscribers, and his business model that surrounds just doing what he does in Krita seems to be working pretty well. So I have no room to talk from the standpoint of, on every level, what he's doing, the way he's doing it, is very successful as far as I can tell. So, that is undisputable. So now what we need to do is go back to shot number 589. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. So I think we already saved this, but let's just go to 589. Right there it is. Okay. And what are we going to do here? Well, let's just take a peek here for half a second. It looks to me like there is no plastic tool involved in this shot. So now what I want to do is I want to be able to repurpose all my content for another shot. Couple key things to remember. Number one, this again gets back to the question about Krita versus OpenToonz. Because in Krita, you could think of it this way. All of this imagery on these layers are baked into the Krita file. Okay? That's important because that means that if I was working in Krita, and believe me, I've done this a zillion times, it's come up over and over, is that if I have this basic shot that's reused with different lip sync or whatever in 4 or 5 different places in the show, if I go in and change the background image, I've got to go into every single Krita file and redo the background, or at least cut and paste it from one Krita shot to another. In Tahoma, that's not true. If I change this background image that's stored on disk separately from the OpenToonz file, all of the scenes that use it get updated automatically. So that, again, is a workflow question. That's why, for me, it makes way more sense to have the image assets decoupled from the animation file. Okay? Hope that makes sense for you guys. All right? Oh yeah, grease pencil, I'm sure. I get the grease pencil thing all the time. And I use the grease pencil. Heck, I've got shots in this show that were done in Blender. Quite a lot of them, actually. Using the grease pencil from either Blender 2.79 or 2.8 plus. I use it. I've got it on my system. I have 2.93 or 4, whatever's the latest one. I have them all on my system. Just I haven't had reason to use them lately. It just hasn't come up. And what happens is you're gonna have the big learning curve and all the effort that goes with using Blender, let's say, where at the end of the day, the actual capabilities that come up in executing the work 99% of the time are exactly the same as what you already were doing in OpenToonz. So you wind up jumping through a lot of hoops for very little benefit in terms of a truly better workflow. Everything I've talked about today about Tahoma versus Krita are things that I discovered made a palpable, repeatable, positive difference in the workflow. So, well, yeah, and I agree with that on that point too. If I have to do, I've mentioned this before, but there's fairly sophisticated particle systems built into OpenToonz. I don't like using them because they're extremely non-performant. So if I have to do a particle system, generally I'm going to go over to Blender because it's going to perform a million times better, in terms of the interactive workspace as well as the render. On every level, Blender is going to kick OpenToonz butt on particles. And a lot of other things too that obviously involve 3D. But if you're trying to have your magic, oh, this is the perfect software that does it all moment, the Blender Grease Pencil is very, very good, but actually has a lot of downsides to it that you don't discover until you dive pretty deep and start discovering what the shortcomings are. And when you do the deep dive with Blender, what you find out is that for 2D animation, most of the time, you're going to do better work faster with less little corner edge case hiccups. with OpenToonz than with Blender. That's been my experience. Other people may, of course, disagree. So, it's just my my point of view. Okay, so getting back to the work here. Obviously, as I said, this background image needs to be changed. Excuse me. I don't like it. But I'm not going to deal with that now. What I want to deal with is the actual requirements of this shot. So this shot, as we go over to the edit, is going to be 596. So the very first thing I want to do now is change a few things. Number one, I'm going to immediately save this as 586. I'm sorry, I said 586, I think. I meant 596. So I'm going to save this as 596. Okay, so now all we did was we created a TNZ file on the disk that's now 596, so that the only thing that I could possibly do in this Toonz file that would damage the other shots that use all these same assets, like these levels, would be to go in and change the levels. Okay, so I've talked about this before. And by the way, I mentioned subscenes earlier and layering and grouping. You'll notice that these two columns are pink. Well, that's because actually each of these characters are in their own subscene that consists of several levels, that includes their lip sync and their shadows. Okay, so each of these guys are in fact a subsheet. All right. Okay, and then this column is, I would assume this is the rain. Let me see if, is that a sub? That's not a sub actually. So this is just the rain. This is just a, it's hard to see actually, I'm sure for you guys, but it basically is the raindrops falling. Okay, so the question becomes, what are we going to do with these guys? This, by the way, is just a composited gradient that just kind of basically vignettes the shot. Excuse me. All right, quick check of the comments. Nothing new. Okay, so the second step when we're repurposing content is to go into the output settings and get those updated. Because right now this is going to, if I were to render this, it would actually copy over shot number 589. We can't have that. This needs to be 596. So let's change it to 596. 596. And I don't need to render it right now. In fact, I don't want to. Why not? Well, because I don't actually know if this shot is going to be the same length as the previous shot that it's being built upon. The previous shot was 42 frames. This one might turn out to be more or less. Okay, so what happens is the guys are like really happy, and they're going, "Oh, can you believe it?" We're going to work out. Okay, so the idea here is to deal with one character at a time, with the caveat that we may be making some. Okay, actually OBS just disconnected. Okay, OBS just reconnected. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to work out. So here's my overall shot, which again, we will be updating the background image for at some point and then re-rendering it. However, right now what I want to do is I want to work out with these characters. They each have their own respective dialogue, and so what I want to do is get them each animated separately, and then we'll deal with timing in the overall scene between the characters so that everybody kind of does what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it. Okay, so the basic caveat with dealing with assets like this that are reused between shots is that you want to make sure that you don't, like, I don't want to modify this drawing. If this drawing needs to be changed, and it does, I don't want to modify this drawing because that's going to break shot number 589 or whatever it was. So what I want to do is make a duplicate, hit the D key, and this is the one I want to modify. Okay? Now in this case, what we're going to actually do is use the plastic tool eventually. But first what we're going to do is get his expression changed. So again, we're working out from the smallest things that need to be animated out to the bigger picture. So what we need to change here is he needs to look up. All we need to do is have his eyes look up, though, because the plastic tool is going to turn his head. We don't need to worry about having him do this, right? Okay, so all we need to do is get his eyes where they need to be. So let's zoom in. We're just going to make this really quick and simple. I'm going to sample the whites of the eyes color, and then hit the V key and just erase, in effect, the the pupils. And then I'm going to hit the, actually I think it's this color. Okay, and then another thing I think I'd like to do in this case is let's soften his expression. He's looking a little cranky, and so we might as well just do this as efficiently as possible. So what I'll do is I'm going to open his eyes up a little bit. That's a little too big. I guess I should be using the B key for that. Come on. Come on. Let's put it in pencil mode so it just, there we go. All right. We're getting into a little bit of one of the caveats about smart raster levels in Tahoma is the problem that sometimes when something's already colored in and you try to paint over it, you really have to kind of press hard and tell Tahoma that you're serious about painting over it. Now in this case, I want to hit the V key. Okay. So there we go. So this, as you can see, I'm really kind of having to scribble to get that drawn in there. And then I'm just going to do a very simple change. Okay, so now he's kind of happy. I guess I would say in this case it would probably be prudent as well to, let's hit the V key and let's just kind of give this guy, hitting the B key now, and just give him a little bit of good cheer, okay? So now let's hit the N key so we see what this is going to look like at actual size. Okay, and the one thing I'm noticing here is I want to maybe dial that in just a little bit more. Hit N key, that looks pretty good. Okay, so now if we rewind. Okay, so if we basically have, let's give him like 6 frames. So the plastic tool, he's going to be starting to turn his head before the change in expression happens. Okay? And then my expectation would be there's just going to be a little bit of a movement with his hand. Just kind of his arm extending out just a little bit. So I'm pretty sure that's going to be plastic tool doable. All right, so let me look at the script. So can you believe it? It's raining. All right, I'm modifying the dialogue to make it a little more concise. And I think I'm going to say, I can't believe it. Believe it's raining. Actually, I'm going to let this guy say the first line, the skies have showed us favor. Okay, I'm cutting this down to 2 lines of dialogue. He says the skies have showed us favor, and the other guy says, yes, yes, let the prince be married. Okay, so the conflation of the rain coming and the way these people view it vis-a-vis the marriage is obviously a bit of a silly religious conflation, but it is what they're responding to. You know, this is a pretty emotional moment because they haven't had rain in quite a while. Okay, Maria says, I can't believe it. Rain. I'm going to leave the dialogue. I'm going to overrule you on that one, Maria. I'm going to leave it as the skies have showed us favor. And the reason being that I want his line of dialogue to speak as directly and concisely to this conflation as possible. So I can't believe it's raining, or I can't believe it rain, just acknowledges what we already know as we're watching the story. It doesn't give us any new information. But if he says the skies have showed us favor, that suggests from the storytelling standpoint that he's responding to Golek's spin, where he's attributing this to a miracle. So for me, this language, the skies have showed us favor, makes more sense from a storytelling standpoint because it actually moves it forward a little bit. I hope that makes sense. It's a subtle difference, but you know, you're trying to kind of keep things packed in as tight as possible here. So he says, the skies have showed us favor. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to move his dialogue upstream a bit. And then we're going to be doing the plastic tool. And he's got 1, 2, 1, 2. I'm going to say, let's put in one more cycle of this here. The skies have showed us favor. It might be a little short yet. Yeah, and I don't actually love the shape of his mouth, which is a little problematic because this mouth was used in other shots. So we've got a problem we need to address here carefully. The problem is that the open mouth shape doesn't quite work. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this the safest way possible. I'm going to add a fourth image here and immediately delete. Sorry, I meant to hit the E key. Delete the mouth. Go back to this one. I don't even think I need to paste it in. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to 4. Okay, so we'll just delete that. Grab number 4, stick it in here. We'll just adjust upwards. Okay, so now what we're going to have is 3 cycles of that. Control C, V, V, V. Sorry, Control V, V. Okay, now let's get rid of all this. Control X. So the second mouth should be disappearing. You know, and actually, surprisingly, I think the solution here is actually to make the smaller mouth, not the bigger one. So that's fine. Makes my job easy. So now all I got to do is go boom, boom, boom with a little fill operation. There we go. So now the lip sync is all a little more appropriate. So let's rewind. The skies have showed us favor. All right, and I want to see one more instance of 1, I think. I hope I'm right. Yep, there we go. Okay, now we got the lip sync correct. And you could certainly argue that it's a little dark. So I'm going to go in here and let's make a couple little adjustments. Let's make his mouth a little transparent, like so. And then I think on the character as well, I'm going to lighten up his outlines a little bit. That will affect the other shots that use this character, but they're going to have to be re-rendered anyway, and I do want the outlines to be a little bit lighter. So for that reason, I think we're going to land somewhere about there, and now we got to look at the plastic tool. All right, so let's save our work. Save early, save often, which of course Maria was about to scream into her computer screen to remind me not to lose my work, because Maria has reminded me of that plenty of times. All right, so let's go here. I like it. I like it. Now one could also argue that what we really want here is not shot number 3. We actually want to just take it out so that he just winds up with this sort of blank smile. Like that. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so now what we need to do is do a little plastic tool, and it's going to be affecting all of the levels here. So I'm going to hit the X key, generate a mesh. Looks good. We'll pull this downstream. And we might as well, because all the drawing is done, so we might as well just pipe everything through the plastic tool right now, because that's the way we're going to want it ultimately. So here's the plastic tool. And now we need to make sure the lip sync and the shadows, not actually in that order, this is the shadow, this is the lip sync, are all going through the plastic tool as well. File, save all. Okay? Right, I wrote that before you expanded. Okay, okay. All right, so here's the plastic tool. Everything looks good. We need to set up a mesh, or I'm sorry, a skeleton. So let's hit the X key, and we're going to build skeleton. So this is going to be a little bit of an interesting one. We want to protect everything along here. We want to keep this fairly simple, so we just get a very judicious bit of a head turn. And then the question is, how well can we control what we're going to want to do with his hand? And the answer is I don't know yet. We'll find out. I'm going to put a dummy bone there so that his upper arm doesn't actually animate too much. Okay, so there's that. And now let's just see what we have here. That's not too bad. That looks okay. In fact, it suggests to me that this would be better, something like that. Because then what we can do is we can have the whole arm kind of move down a little bit, but the hand go out a little bit like that. Okay, and in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just animate this in reverse timing because I didn't stream. The positioning from the plastic tool will propagate through all these earlier frames. So now what's going to happen is he'll lean back. There it is. I mean, look at that. Look how easy that was. Now if you really want to be picky, you could argue that it might be better if his hand opened up. Okay, and I see OBS just reconnected, and I don't know how much we lost, so it looks like a couple seconds. So you could argue that his hand position is a little bit winky. So I am going to take a look at that. I'm actually going to say, let's put this down like that. And maybe, actually I like that better. So one of those classic cases where less animation looks better. I like it. I think we got the job done here. So I'm going to save my work, and Maria had an adventure with needling to save this week. Needing to save this week. I was revising a background. Every time I tried rendering with the revision, Tahoma shut down. I ended up saving and rendering in bits. Yeah, it's happened to all of us. We've all bumped into that at one time or another. The good news with Tahoma and OpenToonz is that normally, if you shut the program down and reopen it, if things appear to have gotten corrupted, they tend to actually fix themselves. Somewhat non-intuitively. All right, so now the question is, has this animation propagated up already? And it looks like it has. So now what we need to do is go down and look at this. Actually, let's look at this one thing here first. Okay, he starts talking on frame 10. All right, so let's go here. And now let's go down into this guy's sub-X sheet. And he's obviously starting to talk way too early for this shot. So we're going to move this downstream to, I don't know, let's call it 19. And we will extend this. So this is going to have to be quote-unquote resequenced. And now the question is, do we need to add a bunch of secondary animation and take it much further? Or can this guy just basically say his line of dialogue and that's that? Let me look at the script. The script says, yes, yes, let the prince be married. So I think probably less is more. Let me look at how this renders up. Okay. Okay, yeah. Yep, less is more. Less is more. So what do I mean by that? In this case, I'm hitting control down arrow. This is still happening too soon. So I'm just going to come up out of this and let's just see if the timing works out. The skies have looked upon us with favor. Yes, yes, let the prince be married. Okay, so now what we got to do is extend the whole shot. I'm going to say let's just bop this down to 60 frames. This shot needs to be resequenced. So boop. So that should make it so that the timing in the sub scene now propagates up into the parent scene. All right, let's just check. Sorry. Okay, yeah. So now what we got to do is make a change here because he doesn't talk enough. Yes. So he says, yes, yes, yeah, actually I like this. What we're going to do is we're going to double this. So we're going to Control C and then give him a little pause in between, Control V, and then get rid of this. This is coming to 66. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to make this extend to 66 as well. This is what we're going to wind up rendering. And then this may or may not need to be resequenced. So just to be safe, I'm going to resequence it. Okay, so now, believe it or not, here we have a shot that is, I don't know, about 8 seconds long that took a total of maybe a half hour to do. you know, which is pretty respectable. I don't know how long I've been working on this particular shot, but again, this is where reusing your assets can really come in handy. The skies have looked upon us with favor. Yes, yes. Let the prince be married. Okay, so now what we could criticize on this guy is, you know, maybe some eye blinks or something. You know, he's a little bit boring, and of course, without a doubt, we could consider plastic tool, but I think in this case, again, less is more. The other character is dominating your attention. Okay, so for the first half of the shot, you're focused on the guy in front. So when the guy in back starts talking, obviously your eyes are going to go to him. And so I don't think he needs to dance around a lot. I just think we need to give him a little bit of life. And so I'm going to do that in the simplest possible way, which is this. I'm not even going to modify this level. All I'm going to do, and by the way, I'm going to save my work first because I'm spontaneously creating a level here. So what I'm going to do is hit the B key, and then I'm going to sample. Actually, I'll go like this. I'm going to hit the R key and sample the flesh tone. Okay. And then I'm going to take the V key and lift. So I'm going to go B key here. Okay. And I think that's it, believe it or not. Yeah. Okay, and by the way, we don't want this here. We want him to be like a mannequin. We don't want him moving at all until it's time for him to speak. So I'm going to put a blink before his line of dialogue. And by the way, this should be to the right so that it's composited over top of everything else, except the shadows, obviously. So I'm hitting Control C. And I'm going to experiment with putting in 2 eye blinks here. And I don't think I want one at the end. So let's just kind of go up out of the sub scene, and I think possibly our work is done, but we'll see how the timing worked out. Yes, yes. Let the prince be married. That's it, and we're going to get out of the shot. That's it. We're done. Nothing more to see here. Okay, so this is shot number 596. So I'm just basically going into the edit right now and modifying it here. And the next shot after this is going to come back to Golik, and it's this really bold shot where he says, "And behold the bringer of the rain." And he directs the attention over to Vespar, the prince, and basically eggs him to come out onto the stage, puts him in this social position where now he has to address the crowd. He has to address his people. He's the prince. In this context that Golik just created, which is a miracle has happened and I'm giving all the credit to the prince. Because obviously the skies want him to get married today, right? So this is a real power play on Golik's part. Well, what do we do next? Well, what we do is we go in here and just double check my output settings. I think I have this correct. Yep, 596. And we just save and render. So let's get this cut into the show, and then we'll be ready to go on with the next shot of Golik, which I'm debating whether I'm actually going to do. I think what I'm probably going to do is quit for now, but let's just see where the muses take us. So I'm going to jump over to here, and we're going to do our same old routine, which is we're going to grab scene number 596. Boom, boom, and yep, 66 frames at a gorgeous 8 frames per second. There it is. We drag it into our edit. We turn off the disable resampling. Well, I should say we turn off resampling. And now let's look at how it flows. We'll come back to the other screen so we can see better. And so Golik is doing his song and dance. They're a little mystified at this point about the rain. Golik's like, yes, yes, the skies. I've appealed to the skies and they've heard you, or something like that. I don't remember what his line of dialogue is, but it amounts to that. And so he's really dressing it up. He's really playing it. And then it jumps to Carliana commenting on, you know, and the king doesn't quite know what to make of it. The skies have us with favor. Okay, and there you can see a problem in the render, obviously. So no big deal. Let's stop the show. There's two things I saw actually. Number one, I'm seeing a bit of an artifact. It looks like we're getting an artifact. I quite literally have no idea what that artifact is, so we'll have to come back to that one. But there you can see this guy's eye blink did not actually fall under the composited effect. Okay, so let me just see here. Looks like that guy's okay, the other guy isn't. So now the question becomes, is the effect, is the body highlight on this guy actually in the main scene? And I don't think it is. It's in the sub scene. I'm sorry, it's this guy. So let's go into the sub scene, look at his schematic, and there's the body highlighting effect. So we have the same problem that we had in the other shot we did. Okay, and the only level that was actually affected by it is column 3, which is our eye blinks. So the only thing we need to do is just do a insert effects, layer blending over, and then pipe column 1 into that, delete that connection, and now what should happen is that the body highlight effect will actually cover his eyes. Now we got to pop back up out of here and look at it. Actually, you know what? I'm pretty sure I got it right. I'm just going to re-render it, and rather than waste a bunch of time diving around inside the shot. So let's see here. Did it work? Did I get it right? Yep, I did. Okay, so, and it looks to me, by the way, like the artifacting that we saw was an artifact related to the fact that the compositing wasn't quite set up correctly on his eye blinks. So we're good. The shot is done. The only thing I don't know about, though, is it appears to me that the body highlight effect is not actually processing. That's a little interesting. So let's double check that one. Let's go down in here and look here. Ah, there's the problem. We need to go through here like that. Okay. Now we're back in business. All right, so that's it. Control-Shift-R, and our show will update accordingly, and everything looks good. Dot, 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 dot. So we're going to watch this. And yep, there we go. Okay, there is also an argument to be made for doing with this guy what I did with the other guy in terms of his outlines. This color, yes, we need to lighten that up a little bit so he kind of sits in the mix better. And that's it. Control-Shift-R, and we are done. Now keep in mind, right now there are either 3 or 4 shots. I think there's 3 shots that use this same structure. So they're all going to have to be re-rendered. So you could basically figure once I fix the background painting, you're going to basically have 3 minutes into loading the scene and hitting re-render. And the whole show will update with the fixed background painting. Okay, so that's that. Now the question, of course, becomes, do we want to... Oh, golly, this is embarrassing. This is embarrassing. I was really rushing this day. I just kind of wanted to get something in there, you know. It's like not great. Well, I think I'm probably out of gas for now. This has been an hour and a half. This has been a good session. So I think I will just kind of end there and get some lunch because we got to take Zuko to the vet this afternoon. He's got a few things going on. So anyway, thanks everybody for being here. As I often say, and I'm now going to say before I end the live stream, there will be more later. And thanks again today, Ed, for chiming in. It was good to hear from you, Darren, Tom, Maria, everybody. Always appreciate the input and the feedback. Mikhail, Claude. I think Claude is gone. So yeah, it's been a fun session. So with that, I will go ahead and wrap it up. And as you guys know, again, there will be more later.